In September 2020, two young boys were fatally hit by a speeding Mercedes in an affluent Los Angeles County community. The alleged driver of the vehicle, 57-year-old well-known socialite and philanthropist Rebecca Grossman, claimed on scene to be utterly unaware of what had occurred. While she proclaimed it a tragic accident, investigators came to a different conclusion. This was a double murder. As the facts were compiled, more questions arose. If this was murder, was Rebecca Grossman the killer? Hi there, I'm Kevin, and welcome to Just Thought Lounge. Today's case captured headlines for years in the state of California, nationally, and across the globe. It's not often that an accused killer was once praised for their selflessness on Oprah, their good works commended internationally. In this case, public opinion shifted out of the accused favor very quickly. Let's take a look. On an evening in September 2020, the Iskander family of Westlake, California, was out for a Monday night walk. Nancy and her three boys were traveling on wheels. She and her middle son, Jacob, wore inline skates. Her eldest, Mark, was on a skateboard, and 5-year-old Zachary was on his scooter. Just ahead of them, by roughly the length of a football field, was Nancy's husband, Kareem, who pushed their 1-year-old daughter in a stroller. At 7:10 p.m., just 6 minutes after dusk, Nancy and the boys decided to cross the street to reach a nearby lake where they could take a photo. Moments later, the mother of 4 recalled 2 SUVs, one white and one black, barreling down Triunfo Canyon Road at what she described as an insane speed. The vehicles reached them, rapidly approaching the family as they attempted to cross the street. Nancy raised her hand to get the driver's attention, but in only seconds, the black SUV was bearing down on her and her youngest son. She dove to push her youngest out of the road. Mark and Jacob, however, were too far across the intersection to reach. After both vehicles had cleared the intersection, the Iskander family was left devastated. Mark had been thrown into the air as he was struck by one of the SUVs, sending him some 250 feet. Jacob was found near to the curb, 50 feet away from the impact. Roughly a quarter of a mile down the road, 57-year-old Rebecca Grossman came to a stop in her white Mercedes SUV, pulling off to the side of the road. The airbags had deployed to her apparent surprise, causing the vehicle's safety features to automatically cut the fuel, which disabled the engine. The Mercedes-Benz service also automatically placed a call to emergency services.
Are you injured? I don't know. Did you hit someone or did someone hit you?
I don't know.
Because they said 2 kids were hit on rollerblades.
No.
So that's not you?
I don't know. I don't know what I did.
Rebecca explained to the operator that she was unaware of hitting anything or anyone. She was directed to wait by her vehicle for the response by the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. When deputies arrived, Rebecca repeatedly asked for further information, namely about the children that the 911 operator had referenced. She also suggested that her husband, Dr. Peter Grossman, a well-known plastic surgeon who treats burn victims, could be of assistance to anyone who had been injured.
Please tell me what's going on.
I'm doing an investigation real quick here.
What's going on with these children? I need to know. I need my husband is at the burn center. I'm sorry, I have to know. I can't. I have children. I have to know. Were they crossing? Were they walking? Were they on bikes? But I don't understand because it was dark. I turned the corner. As soon as I turned the corner.
Rebecca told deputies that after she turned the corner onto Triunfo, her airbags abruptly exploded. She seemed not to have registered an impact. At the scene, deputies were considering the most obvious explanation, that the 57-year-old had been drinking.
Get a blow. You have to blow. You're not blowing. You have to keep going. All right. Hang tight.
Blowing.
We have to get like a large volume to go through here for it to read.
I know. Every time I go to my doctor, it tells me I have no lung capacity.
The breathalyzer test was administered a total of 9 times. Blood samples were also taken. The results varied. Each flirted with the legal limit of 0.08, but none exceeded this amount. The initial results showed a 0.075 and a 0.076. The county lab testing the samples found a result of 0.08, suggesting that the socialite was indeed on the threshold of being legally impaired. However, subsequent tests of the blood samples returned results of 0.073 and 0.074. Physical sobriety tests were conducted at the scene. These did not suggest Rebecca was clearly intoxicated. Her vehicle, however, showed signs of an impact. She had also driven from the scene.
Go ahead and turn around for me.
Yes, sir.
Hands on your back.
Why am I handcuffed?
You're under arrest right now for driving under the influence and causing a traffic collision resulting in a fatal collision.
No!
11-year-old Mark Iskander died at the scene of the incident. His younger brother, 8-year-old Jacob, had been rushed to the hospital, where he later also tragically passed away. Of her boys, Nancy told the media that Mark was the protector of the family. He wanted to be a neurosurgeon in the morning and a stand-up comedian in the evenings.
This lady, she went to a chapel. They said, they're taking donations. They're like, okay, $100, you can pick the next 3 hymns we sing at church. She says, I'll do it. She walks up, old lady, she goes, I'll pick him, and him.
Mark's favorite thing to say to his baby sister Violet was, I promise I'll spoil you, while Jacob would tell people, never mess with her. Both bursting with fun and loving personalities, Mark and Jacob were adored by their teachers and friends. Their loss devastated their church and the entire community.
Hi, my name is Jacob Iskander, and I'm going to show you how you do something the Jacob way, and also known as cool. So,
the LA Sheriff's Department were quick to issue statements regarding the arrest. These included assertions that the 2 SUVs spotted by Nancy Iskander and other witnesses on the road had been actively racing each other, weaving in and out of lanes to overtake one another while moving in excess of the 45-mile-per-hour speed limit. Although Rebecca Grossman did not face DUI charges, the Sheriff's Department did point to alcohol as a key factor.
We've arrested Rebecca Grossman, female, white, 57, for 2 counts of vehicular manslaughter. She's being held $2 million bail. 2 cars were racing. We believe speed is a factor, alcohol is a factor.
She cooperating?
She's not talking to us, no.
Interest in the case skyrocketed following the announcement of the socialite Rebecca Grossman's arrest. Becca, as her friends knew her, was not only the wife of prominent plastic surgeon Peter Grossman, she was also a well-known philanthropist in her own right, having co-founded the respected and highly lauded Grossman Burn Foundation, a nonprofit providing extensive and expensive surgeries to burn victims internationally.
The work that the Grossman Burn Foundation has done to provide so much care, new life for women, children, people around the United States and the world in need of that urgent medical care.
I just wanted to take a moment of your time this evening to say a few words about the Grossman Burn Foundation.
Another miracle at the Grossman Burn Center here in Southern California.
Wonderful story.
The Grossman Burn Foundation has launched a campaign to stop the violence carried out against women around the world.
A local Oscar-winning special effects artist has become a hero to a woman on the other side of the globe, a woman whose face was destroyed by her own husband.
Rebecca Grossman of the Grossman Burn Foundation found out about Eustace. Rebecca takes the prosthetics, travels to Indonesia, and delivers them to Eustace in person.
After a career in marketing and print journalism, Rebecca had traveled the world performing the foundation's work. In Afghanistan, she encountered a 10-year-old girl named Zubaydah Hassan, who had suffered a horrific accident and had been severely burned. Rebecca took on legal guardianship of Zubaydah, moving the young girl into her home for nearly 7 years while she underwent 15 reconstructive surgeries, as well as mental health therapy. She and Peter came to view Zubaydah as their first child, they said.
Our experience with Zubaydah Hassan, the young girl from Afghanistan who was a burn patient, was a life-changing experience. This experience was so dramatic in the way that we thought about our everyday lives. We never thought we'd find ourselves going to Afghanistan or trying to open up a burn center in Kabul or working with people all over the world. Every one of our initiatives, whether they were local or community or international, were inspired in some way by Zubaydah.
In the following years, Rebecca and Peter had 2 biological children. In their $7.6 million mansion in Hidden Hills, a gated community, the family also had 2 horses, 5 dogs, and a 100-pound turtle. It was a less favorable view of the wealthy and privileged Rebecca Grossman that emerged in the aftermath of the young boys' deaths. Mainstream media and social media alike jumped onto the narrative that the once adored philanthropist was in fact a disingenuous narcissist. This view was helped along by the revelations that were about to be made public. As always, outward appearances did not reflect the whole story. In the autumn of 2020, after 23 years of marriage with 2 teenage children, Rebecca and Peter had separated. On the evening of the incident, Rebecca was leaving an establishment called Julio's, where she had met with her married boyfriend, former LA Dodgers pitcher Scott Erickson, as well as another friend. The two had been seeing each other for some time, though Rebecca initially insisted that they were nothing more than old friends. The couple each ordered a single-shot cocktail at the bar before leaving in separate vehicles. It did not take long for law enforcement to sort out that the second SUV spotted at the intersection that night had been that of Scott Erickson. He drove a black Mercedes. Here is where the question of what exactly had occurred in those critical few seconds on the road becomes contentious. Based on a witness statement from a nearby cyclist, investigators determined that the couple had been playfully and recklessly racing from the bar. At one point, a witness claimed they saw Rebecca's white SUV veer into the bike lane in order to overtake another vehicle. Surveillance video showed both SUVs, first Scott's dark Mercedes, followed closely by Rebecca, speeding down the road as they approached the intersection. However, Rebecca argued that there were more than the 2 vehicles on the road at that time. In surveillance footage that was sealed from public release, she claimed that a total of 7 vehicles were captured passing through the intersection in close proximity. Rebecca contended that of these 7 vehicles, her white SUV was the 4th to pass through the intersection. One of the other vehicles could easily have been the one to first hit the victims. A single witness reportedly claimed that one of the other vehicles did briefly pull over to the side of the road after passing the crosswalk. A male driver emerged from the car and checked on their front bumper before returning to the cab and driving off. The assertion was that with multiple vehicles driving through the intersection, at least one of them, in addition to Rebecca's Mercedes, must have also struck the boys. As an extension of this, Rebecca thought that it was likely the black SUV, the one driven by her boyfriend, Scott, that had been the first to make impact. Rebecca then followed moments later. In 2 recreations, one presenting law enforcement's theory of the incident and the second showing the theory proposed by Rebecca Grossman, the 2 SUVs are shown traveling down the roadway. The state's version reflects Nancy's recollection of the event, in which she dodges Scott's Mercedes only to witness Rebecca speed through and her boys no longer in view. Rebecca's version places the blame squarely on Scott Erickson. When the totality of the evidence was considered, the state of California decided to increase the charges. They would argue that the crime met the threshold for second-degree murder. Additionally, she stood accused of vehicular manslaughter and 1 count for a hit and run. If convicted of all charges, the socialite faced 34 years to life in prison.
The killing of my sons were indirect consequences of those extremely reckless action that basically used the car in a way that is a weapon. I don't see a difference between that and, shooting a gun randomly.
The case was met with years of delay as Rebecca's team of attorneys filed motion after motion to dismiss the charges and exclude evidence. They won a motion, for example, demonstrating that the state could not prove the two vehicles had been racing. This appeared to be conjecture that could not be argued as a fact. Meanwhile, while out on a $2 million bond, Rebecca launched a sort of PR campaign in an attempt to mend the damage done to her image. Leveraging her connections in publishing from her previous career as a magazine editor, Rebecca managed to have more than one sympathetic piece published, detailing the pain and suffering that she and her family had endured since what she called the night of the tragic accident. A sympathetic article in Southern California Life magazine was pulled 6 days after publication amid online backlash. Further articles by LA Magazine, where Rebecca offered exclusive interviews to give her perspective, were accused of overt victim blaming. Online and elsewhere, Rebecca made statements suggesting the family should not have been crossing the street after sundown. She claimed, without proof, that they were not in the designated crosswalk. In one article, she was described as living with the crushing guilt for her part in the accidental death of 2 children. Her husband, Dr. Peter Grossman, added that she is in an emotional prison that she may never be able to get out of.
It's been a trend, right, of the lack of responsibility and just the complete disregard of the 2 lives that were gone, that were just taken like that. They had so much in front of them, so much in this life, all of my hopes, all my dreams, and they were just taken. And now I see lack of responsibility. And it's not the first time, right? We've seen Mrs. Grossman pretend nothing happened before. We've seen articles written in LA Magazine on her behalf. I've seen her actually pose to take a picture and say that her life is now a nightmare. I have actually seen her on LinkedIn call it fake news. 2 boys are at the cemetery. Their picture is on a tombstone and she's calling it fake news. If I want to see them, I have to go to the cemetery. Or just look at their friends and try to imagine how they would look like.
Rebecca also launched a website called The Truth Matters, where evidence that she claimed proved her innocence was briefly posted. The website claimed that the LA sheriffs allowed critical surveillance video footage to be erased. The website said that they failed to investigate any of the other vehicles on the road that night, and that they provided misinformation about her blood alcohol level and other details to the media in the days following her arrest. On the eve of the murder trial, the claims being made about a mysterious surveillance video that ostensibly absolved her of any crime led to prosecutors accusing her of attempted jury tampering.
Grossman is asking, her daughter, just release these videos. I want the public to see it. And it creates a sort of like, well, what's in those videos? What didn't we see? And it creates that interest. But I don't want the public to jump to certain conclusions because of that. But there's some smoking gun in that video that's going to change the whole case around.
In addition, a private investigator for the defense was accused of visiting the homes of 3 jurors while hiding their identity and seeking to speak with them directly about the upcoming trial. In late January 2024, nearly 4 years after the death of Mark and Jacob, the trial commenced. Rebecca's attorney, Tony Busby, told the jury, "We will prove to you, even though we have no obligation to prove anything, that Scott Erickson's car hit those children." They pointed to security footage from further down Triunfo Canyon Road that showed the black and white Mercedes. An expert that analyzed the speed of the vehicles concluded that Scott was driving at 72 miles per hour versus Rebecca's 58. The expert did need to concede, however, that this represented the speeds after the boys had been hit by one or both vehicles. Data from Rebecca's Mercedes, although disputed by the defense, was damning. According to the data, prior to the impact and the airbag deployment, the vehicle was traveling at 73 miles per hour and accelerating at nearly 100%. The result was an increase to a speed of 81 miles per hour in the few seconds before impact. The same expert surmised that had she been traveling the speed limit of 45 or below for only 5 seconds prior, she would have had sufficient visibility and response time to stop the vehicle and avoid hitting the children. In order to prove that the crime was murder and not an act of unintentional manslaughter, the state needed to show that Rebecca knew that she was likely to kill someone. They called Detective Sheen of the California Highway Patrol, who recounted an incident with an officer in 2013 who pulled Rebecca over for speeding. Their radar had indicated that she had been driving approximately 92 miles per hour on the 101 freeway. The detective stated that the officer warned the woman that traveling at such a high speed could kill or injure someone. The officer said he remembered the stop because the woman told him he'd better hope he never needs to go to the Grossman Burn Center. He thought he'd be denied services at the facility if he ever needed them. Rebecca also had a handful of other traffic violations stretching back to the early 2000s. Her last speeding ticket had been issued just 5 months before the boys were hit.
We had a specific warning from a CHP officer that speed kills. Just about a month, a little bit more than a month, she was texting about knowing that speed kills. And I think just doing 80 plus miles an hour on a residential street with your accelerator pedal at ostensibly 100%, I mean, that's a murder.
A traffic engineer hired by the defense testified that it was hard to see the crosswalk where the prosecution contends that the boys were struck, and said signage alerting motorists to watch for pedestrians pointed at a location well before where the crosswalk began. Changes were subsequently made to improve the safety of the crossing. The defense further shifted blame to the city by highlighting a lengthy history of formal complaints by locals regarding the safety of that intersection, going back years. Perhaps the most shocking testimony of the 6-week trial was offered by 19-year-old Alexis Grossman, Rebecca and Peter's daughter. The incident had occurred only a quarter of a mile away from the home where Alexis had been living with her mother. The teen had heard of the events and arrived at the scene while her mother was still engaged with responding officers. While by the side of the road, Alexis told jurors that she witnessed Scott Erickson hiding in the bushes. Defense attorneys argued that after hitting the children with his car, the former pitcher parked further down the road and then snuck back to the scene to observe the response by emergency services. Concealing himself behind a tree, Alexis told the jury that Scott was poking his head out and looking to see what was going on. She testified that shortly after, Scott came to the house. His face was red and I could smell alcohol on him. He was freaking out. I was scared that he might do something to hurt me or my family. She testified that he angrily shouted at her, "Why did your mom stop? Why did your mom stop? Why didn't she just drive home?" He then told the teenager that if she reported seeing him in the bushes that night, "I'll ruin you and your family." Investigators found no physical evidence at the scene that a second vehicle had been involved. Vehicle debris appeared to come from only one SUV, Rebecca Grossman's. Meanwhile, a private investigator working for the defense told the jury that 5 pieces of vehicle debris from the crash scene, including 2 Mercedes-Benz emblems, were missing when he went to the sheriff's station to examine evidence. The retired baseball player's vehicle, however, did not show the front damage that was clearly visible on Rebecca's vehicle. Experts disagreed over whether that damage could have been made by a figure falling on the hood from above, as in the defense's recreation. Scott Erickson had been charged with 1 count of reckless driving. His case was resolved by judicial diversion in February 2022, when a judge ordered him to make a public service announcement geared towards high school students about the importance of safe driving. After he did so, the charges were dropped. Bizarrely, given the claims made by the defense that the former professional athlete was primarily responsible, Scott Erickson was never called as a witness at the murder trial. Rebecca Grossman also did not take the stand.
Scott Erickson was the big elephant in the room throughout this entire trial, and nobody brought him to the stand. Can you kind of speak to that and address that at this point?
Both sides have the subpoena power and can bring whoever they feel they want to prove their case, or in the defense to defend their case. And just the way it worked out, neither side decided that was going to work for them or help them.
I mean, given everything that they were saying, the defense was saying, the allegations that they were making, you didn't feel it was necessary to bring you on?
We thought the evidence spoke for itself. As we argued in closing, there was not a shred of evidence that he was involved.
As the jury entered their deliberations, Rebecca Grossman once again allegedly made a move to influence the media coverage of the case.
Okay, for me, the twist in this case came when I was sitting in the courtroom and court had not yet reconvened. Rebecca Grossman was at the defense table, and because she had a moment, she came back towards where I was sitting to sit next to her husband, Peter Grossman. She asked me a question, eventually asked for my business card. He, at the same time, kept saying, stop talking to her. She's a reporter. But eventually I figured out why she asked for my card, and that's because I got this email which basically explains why this case was botched and that there was a lot of evidence that would have proved that she was innocent that was kept out of the case. So at this...
The email received by the Fox News reporter was from an anonymous sender. The content was not made public, though it likely contained the same information published on the Truth Matters website, which was also shut down by court order. According to recorded jailhouse calls, Rebecca was particularly keen to have the video of her at the scene released publicly, though only portions were ever published. She believed that this would show her level of sobriety, as well as her repeated expressions of both confusion and empathy over what she continued to call a tragic accident. The verdict was returned following 2 days of deliberations. Guilty on all counts.
Let me go back to that moment in court when the verdict was read. The children were there. They have a son and a daughter, Peter Grossman. The husband was there. As each count was read, once we got to the second or third account, Alexis, the 19-year-old, literally yelled out, "Oh my God, while the son was sitting next to her, just shaking and crying. They were asking for her to be released and on bail and go back home. But instead, he said, Justin has been delayed for 3.5 years while we waited to adjudicate this case. So no, it's time to move forward. And she was put into handcuffs. And it was at that moment that the Grossman family jumped up, tried to get to her, couldn't get to her. They each yelled and she whispered, "I love you."
As her mother was ushered away in handcuffs, Alexis Grossman reportedly yelled out, "How could you do this?" The statement was directed towards the Iskander family.
We are, finally can move on, we have been waiting for a closure. We have been waiting for Mrs. Grossman to apologize, to take responsibility. And she just chose to fight to the end. And it was heartbreaking to see the lawyers' lies and conspiracy theories, and I'm amazed and glad that despite all their tricks, he couldn't trick our system or the jurors.
The Iskanders faced further heartache in the following months. Rebecca fired and hired new attorneys, once again, further delaying her sentencing. Her team filed a motion for a new trial, which ultimately failed. They were successful in removing the original prosecutors from the case, however, after her newly hired attorney posed a conflict of interest with the DA's office. Then, when her sentence was finally handed down, it came as a blow to the family. The state had argued that she showed no remorse and clearly believed that her wealth and notoriety would buy her freedom. They said she acted with a narcissistic superiority and as though the rules did not apply to her. The judge, however, concluded that Rebecca Grossman was deserving of leniency, stating that she was not the monster the state portrayed her to be. She was given 15 years for each murder and 4 years for the hit and run. These sentences are to run concurrently. Rebecca could come before a parole board in 7 to 10 years, conditional on good behavior. Nancy spoke out about the sentence, which she believed did not reflect the two distinct murders of her two sons. With obvious pain, she called it a 2-for-1.
I said in all my encounters with her, so I've been seeing her for 4 years as I'm fighting for justice for the boys, and I've seen her in court, almost every time I was there. And she's always looking me in the eye, looking me up and down, her family doing the same. Her family at some point would laugh if I cry in court when they talk about evidence or how the boys were found. If I cry, her husband would laugh. So I've seen lots of hate from them. And lastly, it was a letter she sent me when she was incarcerated. And the letter was very offensive in the sense that it was all about her tragedies in life, whatever happened to her when she was a young kid, or her, health issues that she faced after that. And it wasn't a letter to me or about what happened. It was about her suffering in life. And as if Mark and Jacob dying was just one more thing to add to her suffering in life.
The letter written to Nancy contained a few strange assertions. Rebecca said that she had reached out to people at satellite companies like NASA and SpaceX in hope that maybe there was a video that captured what had happened. In the letter, she also outlined her own pain extensively. But what had truly mattered to Nancy and her family was what Rebecca did not write. She did not claim responsibility for her actions, only expressed remorse for the loss in general. In the transcript of a released jailhouse call after the verdict, Rebecca told her now ex-husband, Peter, "You should call Scott Erickson and tell him to get on a video and that he needs to confess. I have a family." Dr. Grossman replied, "I know he needs to confess, but right now, I can't even talk about the case, but that guy needs to. You're in jail for him, and it drives me crazy." The Iskanders filed a wrongful death suit in 2021, which was placed on hold while the criminal proceedings played out. A Los Angeles County Superior Court judge has set a December 2025 trial date for this civil case.
I'm just gonna make it really brief and just really thank you so much for all the support, all the love. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the hugs when you see me. Thank you for the tears. I miss them. I miss them so much.
Mama, do-do-do-do. We love you, do-do-do-do. I said, Mama, do-do-do-do. We all love you, you know that is true.
And that was the tragic case of Mark and Jacob Iskander. Thank you for joining me, and a special thanks this week to Nading F., Rashida Libra, Kevin Sargent, and Mel for joining our Members Lounge. I'm Kevin. This is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.
Cause these crimes get deep, but these stories can't hide. Let me find my seat. Kevin, go ahead and settle in. Gotta be selective, doing all the research, keeping it objective. Always been effective. Can say he got a knack. Pick of the litter. You see how Newton got his back. Yeah, the content that you need. This could be a new sign. We talking the comments.